Study abroad is more than sightseeing, exotic foods, and moving classrooms. It's more than studying art and history, political science and culture up close and personal. Study abroad is more than strolling down tree-lined avenues beneath towering cathedrals or singing 60s songs on a Czech train on the way from a soccer match. It's more than shuffling quietly between barracks at the Auschwitz death camp or listening to young Poles tell Soviet jokes. Study abroad is more than navigating subways in Budapest and Prague, a sunset cruise on the Danube River, or a Mozart concert in a Vienna music hall. What makes study abroad special, as it's practiced at Monroe County Community College, is the blending of all these experiences and many more into a kaleidoscope of sensations that together transcend the individual parts. Study abroad is about connecting the dots. The 2011 version of the Monroe County Community College's Study Abroad program visited 4 countries in Central Europe: Austria, Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic, with a drive through Slovakia. It was led by political science professor Dr. Joanna Sabo and by Gary Wilson, an art professor. My name is Dan Shaw, and I teach journalism at the college. I joined the 2011 trip to help learn how to lead future study abroad adventures. It was clear to me from the beginning that Dr. Sabo and Mr. Wilson are born to teach, and that study abroad is the best possible classroom. Listen to the two of them talk about why.
Teaching comparative politics here in Eastern Europe has been one of the most rewarding academic experiences that I've had. When I ask students in their homework assignments, tell me what you learned that you didn't know before. One assignment I gave among 15 students gave 15 different answers about things like Auschwitz and Nazi rule. And then the next day we hold class and we talk about the difference between authoritarianism and totalitarianism, and they have just seen something that gives that example. So for it to be that closely related has just been amazing. Then we get to Poland and we have Tim and George, people the students will remember using their English names, taking us on a tour of a Polish Soviet settlement, a planned community. And that there is no way in chapter 8, post-communism in my textbook, that I could show them exactly how the Soviets planned a community around a factory, and how they hoped all the people would work and produce for the state, and how we went from that type of planned community idea of communism to a communism that became an authoritarian rule. Those types of experience, being able to let students see them, feel them, hear them, makes teaching comparative politics in these countries amazing.
And when you go in these Gothic cathedrals, even the kids who don't really have much of a belief system, they're perhaps agnostic or whatever, it doesn't make any difference. They walk in and they see the importance, they see how the architecture itself just stirs them. They're just overwhelmed. Their lives will simply never quite be the same because they've now learned something that they didn't know before. And frankly, you cannot get this experience by reading about it in a book. When I take them to museums and they see original works of art, they've seen them perhaps on slides in my class, and then they see the real thing and they say, oh my gosh, I had no idea of the brushwork, or I had no idea of how colorful this was, or perhaps my favorite is I had no idea how big these things were. It really takes, it adds a new dimension of appreciation to the beauty of the art that I'm teaching, at least in my classes, and I think every single one of my students has come away just awed by what they've seen. And what is fun is if I've had students who have been perhaps in an art appreciation or art history class before, and they've studied specific works and they see them in museums, some of them just about do a jig because they're so excited about seeing these works. And as an instructor, that makes me feel really good. And truth of the matter is, I'm jigging right next to them because I'm very excited about these things. When they come here, they see, wow, the human race has really been involved in beauty, and it's been important to these people. And they didn't have technology that we have today, and yet the pains and the lengths that they went to create these amazing monuments and these buildings is absolutely staggering. And I think what it does is it begins to raise the bar for a lot of our students as they begin to see how important the visual is. And they walk around these cities, and it's like they're walking around almost like in a Disneyland, like a fairyland, only this isn't for entertainment. This was a part of their life.
My favorite thing to watch and study abroad, though, has nothing to do with academics. It is when I watch a student who, when we first get here, wants to call home, needs help getting a subway ticket, or is afraid to venture out, with a small group. By the end of the trip, I got this down, I can ride the subway, or they're not asking me for anything. They go from being needy younger people to just independent adults in 3 weeks, and I've got to watch that more than once, and that's really, really amazing to me. The other thing is watching them break down stereotypes or myths that they believed. That, some of them thought that even the intent of communism was evil. How many times they've heard someone back home use the word socialism and they didn't know what it means, and that they'll go back home, and when somebody says, oh, that person's a socialist, that they can say, well, let's talk about that. And that they can do it intelligently, and because not just because somebody told them what it means from a book, but because they've talked to the citizens here. They've done some interviews. They've sat in on some presentations by local people, and that's something they can't get at home. Then we get here to the Czech Republic, and I can't count on both hands how many times students have said, are they really a second world country? Because they seem just like us. We see this big, beautiful city of Prague, and it's so westernized. And we're learning that maybe what we hear back home about them still being developing, maybe that they're already a first world country, and maybe, outside of Prague we might see something different. But having the students wonder about that and understand those terms, first world versus second world, and developing versus industrialized developed. So those kinds of things, seeing it all weave together, and the students actually be able to take what they've learned from the text and work it into what they've learned around them, has been a real rewarding experience.
The educational and personal value of study abroad was not lost on the students. They recognized that their lives were being changed in countless ways.
This experience, study abroad, I think every student should have the opportunity to do this. It's one thing to learn about art in a classroom or politics in a classroom, but when you can get thrown in the mix and go straight to the art gallery and learn about an artist you've never seen before, or go straight to the country and learn about a revolution that happened a year before I was born, then it's something new, and it's something real and tangible that you can see, and it's not just something on paper.
As for study abroad, I've always wanted to go to Europe, and it's been something that I've wanted to do all my life, and when the opportunity arose, I took it. But once I got here, it made me better appreciate how other people live on the same planet that we all live.
So I took study abroad because I really was looking forward to seeing art from different cultures. And since we've been here, I have seen a lot of art everywhere. It's really thrilling as an artist to see architecture and paintings and drawings and sculpture everywhere in a society that we come from, where everything seems so modern and kind of bland. It's really refreshing to see how much art people put into their work.
Studying abroad really gives you that perspective that, these cultures are different, and that each custom and traditions and each way of life you could see it as different. And it's truly a way in immersing you into something different from your own home environment.
The reason why I first came on study abroad was to discover something about myself. I went on the first study abroad 2 years ago to Southeast Asia. When I first went, I didn't know what I was doing, where I was going in life. When I came back, I knew my path. I knew I wasn't wandering anymore, and I knew I wanted to go to school to be an anthropologist. I came on this trip again because it's kind of a reunion for a couple of us. We got to see each other again and grow even closer this time. And I was able to learn more about my personal family coming from Eastern Europe. So it was definitely a great experience.
I'm basically interested in architecture, so this trip has meant a lot to me. I think instead of just learning, you can actually live the experience. Just from learning about the culture to the art to architecture, I think it's all very important.
I can only imagine what life in Europe is like being at home, but coming over here, seeing how the people live day to day, seeing how they do business, seeing how the government is run, seeing just what the economy's like and the culture, and just kind of soaking it all in it's really rewarding.
I just think that there's something to be said for a group of strangers who don't know anything about each other to be able to drop everything in their life in America and come on a trip abroad just to see the world. And by the end of the trip, everyone knows each other inside and out and will have experiences with each other that we can't really recreate in America. For me, the best thing was to walk the streets and just see the countries and the cultures in a way that a textbook and a professor can't explain in America. If you go and really see what it's like for the people who live in these countries, it's a whole other experience.
It's definitely made me thankful to be an American, and I think it's good for anyone to see how the rest of the world works.
This trip has been very eye-opening. Just the people we've been with, I've learned a lot just from them, let alone the tours that we've been on, what we've seen. The Krakow, I thought nothing of going to Poland. It's just not going to be a big deal, but it ended up being my favorite place to go. It was the communist district, Kutna Hora. It was amazing to see how the governments, they laid everything out perfectly for how they thought it was going to be perfect for their people, and the people just rejected it. They didn't want to be told what to do. Nobody wants to be like the person next to them. That's the beautiful thing about life is being different.
We stopped at a coffee shop and had a cafe on a small side street, and there was only 2 tables, and we sat next to a table that was already taken, and there was a older gentleman there talking in English to a lady who would nod her head, turn to another gentleman, and speak French to him. We found out that they were talking politics, and the man was from Denmark, and that's one thing about study abroad, is that you meet people from all over the world, and especially here in Central Europe, is you're going to meet travelers from all over, and to meet someone from Denmark and someone from France and someone from the United States all in one circle having a talk about politics is very interesting.
One of the most intense experiences of the trip came during the visit to the Auschwitz and Birkenau concentration camps in Poland. Listen to the students talk about what it meant to them.
I found the Auschwitz, the concentration camps, to be the most important part that really hit home for me. You can learn about it in the books, but then you get there and it really, really just hits home. You can't. So the emotions that you get when you walked into those rooms in the barracks and everything, you can't teach that in a book.
Being an American student, you can't really get a real feel for what the Holocaust is really like just by reading a book or by hearing about it from your history professor. So getting to see firsthand the living conditions and how small everything was and how scary it must have been, and seeing real pictures of real things like little starving babies, that really got to me today.
I had a very profound and deep moment while we were in Auschwitz. One moment we were down in block 11 at the bottom floor, and this is supposed to be the death block, and everyone was walking in a single file line, and the tour guide wasn't talking, and I just took my headphones out just to hear just the silence and the footsteps, and it took me back. I thought this must have been what it was like, the silence, the pain, the agony, just looking into each cell, seeing cold concrete and a wooden box there, if they even had a wooden box. And it was tragic, and it was deep and touching for sure.
Most interesting thing I saw there, and it really kind of clicked everything together for me, was when we were standing in the death courtyard between the gas chambers and the housing, and we were standing at the death wall, and I could just kind of finally visualize what it might have been to be there, to stand in the same place where someone stood and waited for their death, and to stand in the same place where someone waited to kill innocent people was really kind of disgusting.
I suppose it's a good reminder that the world is never too
developed to fall into that kind of madness again, and I think it reminds people to be diligent so that something like that never happens again, I think. So I think it's something probably everyone should see, especially young people, college kids.
Me as a German, coming to Poland and visiting places who are all connected to the darkest part of German history makes me always contemplating about my nationality, my part of history, my relation to this part of history. So I am happy to bring people here because I feel it is a duty for me as a German, especially for me as a German, to bring people here and to remember and to remind them what was going on back then, and to keep the memory alive so that this part of the history of German history, Polish history and Jewish history is never be forgotten.
Everywhere we went, there were towering cathedrals built over the last 1,000 years. In some cases with additions added during most of the intervening centuries. As Professor Wilson noted earlier, the students were captivated by the beauty, by the staggering architecture, and by the political, cultural, and social roles played by the church and embodied in the cathedrals.
My favorite personally were the Gothic cathedrals. After a while, your neck starts to cramp up from just straining your neck to look at the top. It's like it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going, and you wonder how these structures can be built up so tall and not fall over. It's just, some of the stuff is amazing. It's like you didn't even know architecture could do that, and especially considering these things are 1,000 years old in some cases. They're pretty wild, and you have to see them for yourself to really understand just how incredible they are.
We're at St. Barbosa, this Gothic cathedral, I think. And I don't know, I guess my favorite part is that these are from like the 14th century, those oil paintings or wall paintings. They're incredible.
The cathedrals here were absolutely stunning. It's not really something that can be captured by a video camera or a photograph. When you're there, it's like being somewhere else. And it's kind of sad that the church in the spiritual sense is in the state it's in Europe, because it's so dead. And America is really where all the believers are, even though Europe has all the history and all these majestic cathedrals. They're very empty. They're pretty much just open for tourist attractions. So, in America, our churches, my church is very plain in comparison with these things. But it's like there's something there, where these big churches, it doesn't feel like there's anything there anymore.
A lot of the Baroque and Rococo churches, cathedrals, like the one in St. Peter's Basilica and St. Peter's in, that one was in Budapest, and the one that was in Austria, Vienna, those were done for Catholic propaganda. They were there so that individuals could, because they couldn't read, and they weren't allowed to read in the original Latin, as the priests were, so that they could read the stories through pictures as they went through the church, and it allowed people to come into their church instead of the Protestant churches, because it was a lot more flamboyant and more beautiful than the Protestant churches, which didn't believe in all the artwork.
Came to the Church of Bones today, and it's been a pretty amazing place. A pastor back in the day started getting built in the 1300s. And they actually brought ground from the Holy Land. He traveled to Palestine, went to Golgotha, where Christ was resurrected. They brought it here, and so that's why this place, everybody wanted to get buried here. They wanted to be, buried on the same ground that, Christ was killed. And ended up being, there's like 40,000 some bones here. It is quite a place. Just the chandelier made with every bone in the human body. It was something to see. I never expected to see something like this, and it's very an interesting place. And you walk inside, and it's cold, and it's just dark, very, very dark place. There's just skulls everywhere. it's really something to see.
Being at the Church of Bones, didn't know what I would expect when I got here. It's definitely an eerie feeling. You can tell it's really cold, and just knowing that it's real human skulls, it's just weird. It kind of feels like Auschwitz in a way, where there's just so much death, but they're two very different things. I mean, this doesn't really depress you. It's just really interesting that people would actually want to be in a church, have their insides on display. But Auschwitz is definitely kind of a depressing feeling, knowing that you could be standing in an exact spot where someone passed away from starvation or was murdered. So definitely puts in perspective.
Talking to students about this study abroad trip offers insight into the learning experience. Here's a sampling, a kind of potpourri of senses, perceptions, and observations.
There's no shortage of things to see in Europe. From the cathedrals, there's a giant cathedral in every city, but they're all different, and it's fantastic. From going to Auschwitz to going to the baths in Budapest, there's absolutely no shortage of things to do or see. Going to different museums and seeing the way they celebrate each other's artwork from different countries is really interesting. And even shopping in stores and trying to bargain or trying to talk to the shop owners is really interesting because there's that language barrier, and it kind of makes things fun. And that's one thing I enjoyed about the trip too.
I guess the rides here reminded me of home with all the farmland, and then it was very different once we traveled through Slovakia, and we got to see all the incredible mountains and hills. I guess so far my favorite parts have been to see the castles and how they've been sort of built and rebuilt with every different generation and different time period, building on top of each other and coming together to a totally unique object.
What I think is really cool about this trip is that each city has its own personality. None of them are the same. They're really interesting. Like in Vienna, everything was really westernized, and people spoke a lot of English, so it was really easy to communicate with people. In Budapest, they seemed really prideful and kind of traditional, which was also really cool because that's a heritage city for me. And then in Poland, it seemed really a small town, really close-knit neighborhoods. But outside, it was also still really interesting because there were a lot of street performers. A lot of people just kind of out all the time. And then in the Czech Republic, in Prague, people are a little bit more like Budapest, kind of not as social as they would be in Vienna, but still really fun to be around.
My favorite part of Budapest was going to the hot springs. I wish we had those in America. That was really cool. Another part of the trip was experiencing our night cruise on the Danube. When we first started, it wasn't really dark yet, and as we came back, all the city lights were on and on all the buildings, and we were able to see Parliament lit up and the castle and all the other buildings in the city.
It was really neat to see that Budapest had two sides to it, a business side and a more of like the lush nature side to it. But there was also a lot of architecture and art. So you got to see a political side to Budapest and you got to see an artsy side to Budapest. So there was something for everyone, which was neat. My two favorite places that we've been on the trip were Hungary, Budapest, and here. Because there was a mixture of both art and politics. We got to see two things at once, two major things from both classes that we took, and they were absolutely beautiful. There was art, but there was also politics, and there was just a sense of like beauty and serenity about it.
Probably my favorite part of the trip would be Budapest. Just the different types of buildings. Each building was different. The old world style. It just seemed like you were completely out of the country. Different culture, different people. Even seeing the gypsies in the street. It's just nothing you see in the United States.
What I saw so far in Krakow is that it looks more like you would expect an Eastern European country to look like. Vienna and Budapest were very upscale, more like they were more put together, and Poland and Krakow more rustic and ruins, and it's really what you would find in a history book.
I was nervous at first because I was stressing out. We were moving so fast. We were only spending a couple days in each country, and I was stressed out trying to get my work done and get to see everything in the cities. But when we stopped in Prague and actually got to relax and get to know people and the way things work, it was a lot more fun. And I had a way better time in Prague than any other place.
One thing that was extremely different was the bathrooms, the paying for them, and the toilet paper is awful, and half the time they don't have hot water, even when you pay for them. And I never really realized how nice it is to just be able to walk into a store and use their bathroom without having a money window or a cash register.
Pretty much, somehow I end up singing somewhere. The other day we ended up singing with a bunch of drunk Austrians on a tram train, and they had this big megaphone and singing some Aretha, a little bit of Respect. It was really hysterical. And then we also went on a jazz cruise, and they asked if I would sing, and I sang Peace in the Valley, which is an Elvis Presley song, and they kind of, I don't know if I sing all that great, but everybody seemed to enjoy it, so I ended up singing some more, and it was a lot of fun.
The MCCC Study Abroad program is very much about the enthusiasm, the energy, and the professionalism of Dr. Sabo and Professor Wilson. From the first moments at the airport to the final tearful goodbyes, they engage the students in learning and in behaving in ways that would make Monroe County Community College proud. Here's a sample of what the students had to say about them.
I love Dr. Sabo because she is an amazing woman and she inspired me to go on this trip, or else I would have probably never left Monroe County.
I've taken Mr. Wilson's art classes, including drawing, and he's really a great teacher. He teaches you not just how to see with your eyes, but how to draw what you're seeing.
Have you heard enough about study abroad? Well, Professor Wilson has one more reason the 2011 trip to Eastern Europe will be memorable.
Perhaps the best part about this is from now on in, when you watch a James Bond movie, you're going to see all the sights and you're going to say, isn't this cool?
We started this look at study abroad, MCCC style, by discussing how the overall experience is greater than the sum of the parts. Those students who left Monroe County on May 10th returned on May 29th with more than just a list of amazing experiences. They returned transformed, different people, more mature, more confident, more aware of the world around them. I think it's safe to say they returned better prepared to tackle the challenges life sends their way, and more likely to contribute to meeting the challenges facing their community and their world.